Hi everyone, this is Dr. Serge, the Nutrition Sciences. Today I wanted to go over the part 2 of the EAT study that was published in the Lancet a few months ago. In the first part, we went over a few concepts of macronutrients and micronutrients. So we saw that the recommendations of the authors doesn't fit what the government recommends when it comes to the nutritional value of the diet, meaning that if you follow these recommendations, you're going to have deficiencies in your diet. Okay, and one of the main thing I wanted to point out on this chart is this yellow part over here, which is unsaturated fats. They recommend to eat at least 14% of these fats, and I wanted to break down a little bit more in detail what they mean. We know today if you eat more than 7 or 8% of unsaturated fat, you may actually have an increased risk of cancer and heart disease and obesity and diabetes and any other issues. One of the reasons is these fats contain trans fat. Okay, we know today trans fat is highly toxic. So let's go over what we mean by unsaturated fat. So this is the amount of oil that has been consumed in a country. We can see that the major one is soybean, more than 50%. And then the second one is canola, which is about 4 or 15%. And then the third one is corn, which is about 13%. So if you look at the three major ones, about 85% of oil consumption covers by these three fats. And we know that these fats are the main source of trans fat in our diet. Okay, we know soybean oil is highly toxic to the liver, for example, or to the thyroid, or to the pancreas, leading to obesity and diabetes and heart disease. So if you follow these recommendations from the EAT Lancet study, you would most likely have an increased risk of heart disease and diabetes and cancer. The other part I wanted to show you is to look at these different sources of protein. So if you know from the 70s that the consumption of red meat has decreased about 20%. Okay, if you can see the red part over here. And chicken or poultry has increased more than 50%. Seafood intake and eggs are more or less the same. The other big category that have increased is cooking oil. We just talked about the fats, the corn, the soybean, and the canola. So that has increased like almost 300%. Butter consumption remained the same. The grain intake has increased about 20% since the 70s. And caloric sweeteners like sugar, Splenda, aspartame, and all those different sugars increased more or less a little bit since the 70s. So now I wanted to go over fats. We know that since the beginning of last century that the increase of fat, which is this blue line over there, increased significantly since 1912 up to 2010. As you can see in orange, the line which represent obesity have increased as well. So there's a direct connection here with the intake of fat and weight gain. And if you break it down, we can see that the main one that has been increasing is the dark blue over here, which represent polyunsaturated fat, which is unsaturated fat, which are the fat we just talked about, which is corn, canola, and soybean. These are the three main fats that we have increased in our diet. And these are the fats that are most likely responsible for the increase in obesity since the 50s. And we can see saturated fat and monounsaturated fat increase, but it went down. So these remain more or less the same. Okay, so saturated fat has been blamed for the epidemic of obesity, but we can see from this chart that this is not the case. The responsible fat is unsaturated fat. From this chart, it's really busy, so I don't want to go over that. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this. I just wanted to point out that the major line over here is the dotted one, which represents obesity again. And what has increased a lot since the beginning of the 70s, again, is the intake of added fats or oils. Again, these are the fats we just talked about, which are corn, canola, and soybean. These three fats are the major fats responsible, again, from the increase in weight, as we can see from this graph. Okay. The other part I wanted to bring about on this is this one. Okay, we can see that we've been told that red meat is bad for us. It leads to heart disease and cancer and diabetes and any other issues. For this reason, a lot of people actually switch their red meat to chicken. And that's why chicken increased about 100%. So we can see from this second graph that the consumption of protein coming from nuts, seafood, or eggs are more or less the same since the 70s. Okay, the intake of red meat has decreased almost 100%. As we can see, the intake of chicken has doubled up since the last 50-60 years. Okay, on the other side, we can see an increase of heart disease and cancer and obesity and diabetes since we made that switch. So my point is, red meat is not responsible for the increase of cancer or heart disease, for example, or Alzheimer's disease or any other issues. This graph may lead us to believe that the increase of chicken may be part of what's going on in our population today. So if you really think about it, we know that chicken today is mass produced, and they are fed corn most of the time, or soybean. So if you really think about it, the chicken you eat was raised on corn and soy. And we know today that these two grains of fat are responsible for the increase in obesity and various other issues. Okay, so if you really follow and look at the EAT recommendations, you will realize that it doesn't make sense. The whole diet is based on grains and low protein intake, which leads to deficiencies like we just talked about. So the idea here is to really eat fresh foods, fresh vegetables, low grains, because the grains are toxic, a moderate amount of protein, animal protein. It could be chicken, could be fish, could be nuts, eggs, or red meat, and a moderate amount of good quality fats like avocado and coconut oil, for example. Okay. Thank you for watching. God bless you all.